help you in case I don't.
I think you guys were on Mitch.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, May 25th, 2016 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission is a citizen advisory group to the City Council. We are charged with making recommendations concerning land use plans, planning processes, and/or on matters of plan implementation. All regular meetings of the P&Z are quasi-judicial in nature and are recorded for record retention and minute transcription. Prior to this meeting, we held an agenda clarification meeting. The following is the official agenda of the P&Z. Discussion and commission action will be limited to these items on the agenda. Any citizen who wishes to address the commission shall first be recognized by the chair and shall give their name and address for the record. If a citizen wishes to read documentation of any sort to the commission, they shall first seek permission from the chair. A 3-minute time limitation is requested for presentations to the commission. Agenda item number 1, disclosure of conflict of interest, ex parte communication, and site visit. Agenda item 2, approval of the minutes from both the May 3rd, 2016 work session and the regular meeting held on May 11th, 2016. Agenda item 3, short plat field subdivision. Agenda item number 4, continued public hearing on the subdivision ordinance. This time I'd like Aislinn to call roll, and if each commission member would state their name, the area they represent, and respond to agenda item number 1.
Jack Brennan.
My name is Jack Brennan. I live in the Johnny Creek area. I did make a site visit to agenda item 3, and I have nothing else to report.
Ryan Loveland.
I'm Ryan Loveland. I'm from the Alameda area. I have nothing to report.
Ryan Satterfield.
Ryan Satterfield from the Highland area. Nothing to report.
Matthew Tubby.
I'm Matt Tubby from the Highland area. I have nothing else to report.
Chair Lewis.
Kathleen Lewis from the Green Acres area, and I have nothing to report. At this point, we'll move on to agenda item 2, approval of the minutes. Have the commission members had the opportunity to read the minutes from our work session on May 3rd and our meeting on May 11th? Any corrections?
I would make a motion that we approve the minutes from the May 3rd and May 11th, 2016 meetings.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ryan Satterfield moved and Jack Brennan seconded approval of the minutes from both the May 3rd and the May 11th, 2016 meetings. Would you call for vote, please?
Brennan.
Yes.
Loveland.
Yes.
Satterfield.
Yes.
Tubby.
Yes.
Chair Lewis.
Yes, the motion carries. All right, at this point, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, short plat field subdivision. Dylan J. Field and Rocky Mountain Engineering and Surveying have submitted an application to subdivide approximately 5.49 acres into 2 residential lots located west of Shale Drive and north of Field Drive. And I think we have someone from Rocky Mountain to present.
I am.
Yay.
I'm Joel Dixon. I'm with RMES. I am representing Dylan Field on his project Field Subdivision.
And would you state the address?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
I
yes,
forgot
please.
about that. I
And that's
apologize.
okay.
600 East Oak Street, Pocatello, Idaho.
Thank you.
It's a pretty straightforward project. It's a 5.5 acre project that we're looking to split into 2 different lots. There is an existing home on lot 1 that will remain, and on lot 2 we will be placing a new home. The utilities on lot 1 is currently being serviced by City of Pocatello water and a septic system that's still on its first drain field, and we have allocated a spot or ensured that there's room for a second replacement drain field. Lot 2 is going to be serviced by both City of Pocatello water and sewer. The water is going to tie into Shale over at the intersection of Field, Shale, and Johnny Creek. And the sewer is actually gone through the Kevin and Kathy Coffin's property. Last season, the Coffins had their septic system fail, and the applicant and the Coffins worked together. They actually tied into the shale sewer and got the Coffins on the city sewer, and we stubbed the sewer into Lot 2 as well. So both the utilities services for Lot 2 are in. We just need to go through the subdivision process and get that approved so he can start building his home. I looked through the staff report. There's nothing strange on that. We are good with all their conditions, and I just ask that you approve the project as submitted with the staff conditions. But if you have any questions or need clarification, I can take my best shot at it.
Okay, any questions? I do have one.
Okay.
The septic, so as I'm looking at Block 1, Lots 1 and 2, the, which lot has the septic system on it?
Lot 1.
Lot 1.
And that's where the existing home is.
Are there any plans to connect to the city sewer system at
Not
this
at
time?
this time. They still have their second replacement drain field to go, so they just wanted to go with that.
Okay, and so for the second home, though, the one that's being built, it will be connected to both
Yes, we
water
looked
and
at whether or
sewer?
not we wanted to do septic, but we're so close, and with the Coffins letting us go through their property, it made it a lot more financially feasible. So we just went ahead and connected in there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you for your time. Matt?
Evening, Madam Chair, Commission members, Matthew Lewis, Planning Manager for the city. Really nothing to add on this one. Just the reason that it's before you is based on the municipal code 1608-250, and which is subdivision. And once you subdivide one parcel into two, then it requires that you have to plat it, and does allow for the short plat process. So that's what we're going through. This is actually scheduled for the be before the council, I believe, on the 2nd. So as Joel indicated, they meet all the minimum lot size requirements. The new lot with the residential home will be hooked into the water and sewer, and the other one will just remain as it is with the septic and so forth. So not really any issues on this other than just going through that process. So.
Other questions for Matt? I do have one, and I apologize for not asking it sooner. So this is up in the Johnny Creek area?
Yeah.
Are all homes built up there allowed to have septic systems?
Well, yeah, it depends. It depends if you're within a certain distance of water and sewer. And in this case, they're within that distance. Mm-hmm. So if they build anything there on that new lot, they have to at least run the water and the sewer. The other one has been approved by the health department and so forth, so it can remain. But if they're within a certain distance, I think it's 300 feet, they have to hook in.
So going forward, there's property that's undeveloped in the Johnny Creek area.
Yeah, but as you go up the road, you're probably not within the distance to run water and sewer, within a reasonable distance.
I would have some real difficulty having development up there without water and sewer hooked into the city.
Yeah, I mean, there's been, ever since I've been here, there's been at least 2 times as you go farther up Johnny Creek, where they've looked at doing what is it? What do you call it now? Yeah, it's when they do I want to say it's a PUD, but it's not. Okay. It's one of those where everybody has to agree, has to be 66%.
Like an LID.
Like an LID.
Okay.
And there's been at least 2 times that has been looked at ever since I've worked here, and it's never happened.
Okay, well, I
And
think
so-
that's a discussion I'd like to have with staff at a different time, at development up there.
Yeah, it's expensive to do that. And the homeowners and so forth would have to, they would have to agree to that.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily talking about existing, I'm talking about future development.
Yeah, as you get up, I mean, when you get up into the countryside and all those that we've looked at, that's all water sewer. It's
Okay.
it's the area in between. Once you get past field a little bit, that's where it becomes an issue. So it's that stretch
Okay.
that goes up Johnny Creek.
Okay.
So you get up into Juniper and all those areas, those are all like septic and so forth. That's where the issue is.
Okay.
It's not down.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, any further discussion on this? I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the short plat of the field subdivision with the staff conditions.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
We're being
Go
consistent
for it.
tonight. Ryan Satterfield moved and Jack Brennan seconded approval of the short plat for the field subdivision, including the conditions. Got that? Then if you'd call for a vote, please.
Brennan?
Yes.
Baldwin?
Yes.
Satterfield?
Yes.
Covey?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Joel. Okay, at this time, we will move forward to the continued public hearing on the subdivision ordinance. What I'd like to do is go ahead and ask Dave to come up and briefly go over with us the changes that were made after our last work session and discussion.
Good evening, I'm Dave Foster, Associate Planner for the city. As has been stated, when we left the last work session, we moved into reviewing with our staff committee about some of the options. A couple of the areas we were talking about still were dealing with the short plat process, building permit issues, and bonding issues having to do with the warranty and the surety bonds, and making sure we inserted a section in the final plat recording about being able to do bonding at that point too, beside the phasing language that we already had in there. So the short plat section, which affected section 16.16.10, what we added before we left it short plats without dedications would be going basically from staff to council for approval, bypassing the commission. Suggestion is to add short plats that may include a dedication of a right of way that typically would involve installation of utilities, services, infrastructure. Letting them do the same process. A short plat again is 4 lots or less under the city code, and so the process would be the same for a short plat with a dedication. We'd still do a staff level review, and then it would not come before the commission. It would go directly to the city council for review and a decision. So it would knock about 30 days off of the process for those also. The difference would be is whereas a short plat without a dedication could basically be approved and recorded as soon as they could get a short plat to us, that met the standards. If we do a short plat with a dedication that would require infrastructure, it would still end up being in the same process as a 20-lot subdivision that was putting infrastructure in. In other words, we still have to have construction drawings. We still have the option of recording with a surety bond or recording after development, because it would still involve infrastructure. And so that part would remain the same as a standard subdivision because of those issues. So that language was also inserted that the short plats with dedications are not exempt from that final process that a regular subdivision would be for those reasons. One of the other sections had to do with besides the recording option and the short plat option, had to do with the building permit issue. And the information there was language to be able to issue a building permit basically as soon as we could. So there was a lot of discussion at staff level on this because it can get a little messy depending on how we were looking at it. And we tried to keep it simple. So the basic requirements would still be is because you need a lot, block, legal description, a final plat would have to be recorded in some fashion, whether it was a phase development or if someone, say, had a 20-lot subdivision and only wanted to go 10 lots, you know, they could break it off at the 10 lot even though they've been approved for 20. But it would still require the final plat had to be recorded because that gets us a legal description, which is a lot and block. It gets us a parcel identification number for tax purposes through the county. And when we have those things, we can assign addresses to them. The compromise that we came up with on that is we would still need infrastructure completed to the farthest lot line so that you'd have everything into that farthest lot line for service for the issuance of the permit. Some of the things that was discussed on, well, you know, if the street isn't paved, you know, could we go ahead and do it? And then put a clause in there that we won't issue a CO or we'll hold the CO, certificate of occupancy for the house if it got done first. Have surety bonding for the infrastructure that wasn't done. And that got, as far as implementation wise, a little sticky. It's basically, you know, if a structure is built, if we issue a permit and it's built under code and it's completed under code and has water and sewer to it, telling mom and dad and the two little kids that they can't move in the house because the development didn't get far enough by the time they got their house done, and so we're not going to let you occupy it. You got a construction loan out that needs to be rolled into a mortgage. I mean, it's like we don't want to go down that road. If we're going to issue a building permit, we want to issue it so it can go all the way through. When they're done, they're done. They get your occupancy permit. They move in the house. So this was kind of the compromise we came in with. I mean, that's what it is. It's a compromise. But it does clear a little bit more, but it does hang on phase development and having that infrastructure completed, so there's no reason to hold certificate of occupancy once it's been issued. So the bonding, and we had to play a little bit with the surety bonding because the bonding issue we were talking about had to do with the warranty bond. Before, what we're looking at is a 15% amount of the cost of the infrastructure at plus the 25%. So it was basically based on 125% of the value of the infrastructure and holding or requiring a 15% warranty bond for 2 years. After a lot of discussion, it was determined that based on practices with liability also, is we could reduce that to a base warranty bond amount of $25,000 or 5% of the estimated cost at 125%, whichever is greater. In other words, a subdivision, whether it was a short plat or a regular plat, would have to hit a $500,000 value before the 5% would kick in. Otherwise, it would be a 25% bonding period.
You mean at $25,000?
$25,000, yes.
Okay.
So what it we had to back into, before we were holding 15% of a surety bond. Well, that wouldn't be the case anymore under this process, is that once the plat was done and everything was done, and the warranty bond was posted, then we would release all remaining balance of the surety bond back, to the developer. And the only thing that would be held would be the warranty bond period. There's discussion on the fact that some developers already have contractor's licenses with that kind of bonding, and this would be the legal department's end of it, but they would need to make sure that that type of bond covered warranty work for workmanship and durability as it's written into the code here. So again, there was a lot of compromise. We felt from a staff level that this was something that we could implement, and at this point we would put this in front of you and for feedback and discussion, and what you feel. If anybody's got any brighter ideas, we're still listening. So
And we appreciate your listening to us.
so, with that, I'll close. If there's any questions specifically, or
I think what I'll do is open it up to see if
Sure.
we have any public input
Okay.
before we move on to that section. So thank you very much for
Thank you.
reviewing that with us. Because this is a continuation of a public hearing, I do invite anybody from the public who would like to make a comment regarding the proposed subdivision ordinance in front of us to step forward. Okay, we have no takers, then Commission,
I move that we close the public hearing on the subdivision ordinance.
do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Jack Brennan moved and Matt Tubby seconded closing the public hearing on the subdivision ordinance. Aislinn, if you'd call for a vote, please.
Brennan,
Yes?
Loveland,
Yes.
Satterfield,
Yes.
Tubby,
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes, motion carries. The public hearing is now officially closed, which opens it for discussion among the commission members as to what our next steps will be. We
So
have-
close the hearing. Kind of implies to me that we're ready to move on with this thing. Either that or we should have left it open.
Well,
We should have discussed that maybe a little bit.
we have the option of either
We can always
recommending.
We can't open it back up.
We could always recommend that this move forward, or we can recommend that it will move forward to the city council. It can either go with a recommendation of acceptance by the city council or a recommendation of non-approval. So that's where we're at right now.
Or we could,
We can't reopen the public hearing. We'd have to go through the whole process of,
I have some questions for Dave if
Dave, would you mind?
Okay.
Thank you.
So when you were explaining on the page 25 for the building permit section, talking about ways to possibly make that available prior to final acceptance, and the compromise, I guess I'm just not fully understanding what the compromise was, because as I read this, I'm basically seeing what it is currently. Am I missing something, or?
No.
Okay.
That became kind of the stumbling block is that, when we got to the point, well, we know we have to have the plat recorded. We know we need life, health, safety, for whatever the structures. And we looked at not only what the existing code says, and then what was, it was a protocol that was developed for issuing early building permits. All that came back with being hinged on, we're going to either shut your water off or we're not going to issue a CO. And that's a third-party issue for the most part. When we looked at what the protocol was set up on, it was pretty clear it was set up on developers building houses in their own development more than anything. Not that, you sold lot 9 to John Smith and he came in to get his own building permit because he already owned the lot.
Mm-hmm.
But he has no control over finishing the subdivision. None.
Right.
So we felt there was a jeopardy there that, we may be holding someone, an individual's building permit because the developer failed to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just a position that is really kind of untenable from our position because the house is done. It meets all the codes. Everything was approved. But there's obviously some part of the infrastructure that isn't done for that lot.
Right.
And that's always the key. It's that lot that we're dealing with, the single lot. So in that aspect, we back out and it's like, well, what is the way that we can do this and go all the way through the process? So it did basically revert back to everything had to be done for that lot to that point, and then the developer makes the decision if we're going to go down that road, we have everything done there. So it puts you into either probably a phase recording then.
Mm-hmm.
That again, if it's the first 10 lots, we think we've opened up that. It's a similar process you can do now. But for instance, I think the difference is now let me think this through a second. If you got your 20 lot subdivision approved, it's gone to council, they approved it, but you're developing before recording. So all you have your construction drawings and you're just developing. There's no warrant, there's no surety bond, nothing in place. Basically now is if you've got those 20 lots approved and you only want to do 10, you're going to post a surety bond for the other 10. Okay. The way this code would be written is you don't have to do that. You can just record the 10. You don't have to go back to council. You don't have to do anything. You can just say, I'm just going to do 10 right now. I can bring everything up to this point, and I'm going to record those 10, and we're going to start selling and building houses. So you have no surety bond requirement for the other 10 because you're not doing them yet. You don't want to record it yet. So I think that is a little bit of the compromise. So again, yeah, we just kept kind of rambling into the brick wall on this one. And we looked at a couple others. One of them called it, basically to be able to build spec houses. But the requirement was it had to be on an existing street. Everything had to be done. And it's like, well then that's not an early, the lot's done, their plat's recorded, there's a street there. But it had that commonality as everything had to be there, for the lot that was being issued on. So there was no hold on the CO.
Mm-hmm. So even with the bonding in place, then it still felt that that hold would be too detrimental for the risk would be too high.
Well, it's partly risk, but it's also partly implementation. From the concept of going to the building department when they've finished everything and telling them, we're going to hold the CO because the subdivision isn't done. Well, the question is, well, why did we issue the permit in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have they don't have any reason to hold a CO. The house is done. It met code, passed all the inspections. You got water there, you got sewer there. So it's part of that type of philosophy that's a difficult thing to do. We're going to shut the water off, things like that. And so, I think when we thought about going beyond the protocol, that if this wasn't necessarily developers building houses on speculation on their own lots, it was pointed at, you've sold the lot. Well, you can't sell a lot till the plat's done. If the plat's done, then the infrastructure should be there, and whoever sold that lot should be able to go through that process without being tied to the developer again. You know, they didn't finish, you know, something.
So my understanding currently, if somebody is developing a subdivision and has a minor punch list, but does not have final approval, that they can bond for that punch list and get permits issued, but the CO is still held. And that's currently my understanding on how it is done. And so what I'm reading here is that that now goes out the window, and we have to have the final acceptance and inspection and everything before any permit. So to me, I read this and I look at it, we're going backwards rather than trying to meet somewhere.
Okay. What we found is that protocol is where that information's coming from. It is not in the subdivision code.
Okay.
So there's the first hiccup. If we have a process like that, it should be codified. It should be in the code that allows those things to happen. And it's not. It is a protocol that was developed for early issuance, what we call early issuance of building permits.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the technical aspect, that's a problem. You know, if that's what we want to do, then you put it in the code. You say, we can issue, just like this is trying to lay out, when can we do this? It's in the code. Because there's some subjectivity still involved with that protocol. And it falls to basically an inspection from the engineering department and fire department that they're okay with issuing the permit. There's a lot of subjectivity there. What does that mean? It did give some listing, well, we have to have this, this, and this, but basically about the only thing from reading it that was still open is probably the street didn't have to be paved. It had to be rocked to the point where the emergency equipment can get in and out. So how far in is that lot? How far does the fire truck go? You know, we're not going to be plowing that road in the wintertime, you know, because it's not there. So when you look at that kind of analysis, it's like, you know, besides the technical aspect that it was not codified, it still has a lot of subjectivity in it. And we just, quite honestly, weren't real comfortable with going down that road anymore.
Okay, so with that, are you saying that that process, it will be gone with this?
Yes.
That protocol would no longer exist?
Yes, the codification here would take precedence over that. Because again, that's what it is. It's a protocol.
Right.
It's not anything that has, you know, the stamp of officialdom on it.
Okay.
But you're right.
All right. On the bonding on the bottom of page 28, and I understand how the bonding is now set up to no longer have that 15% be withheld. But I guess I'm wondering why number 1 is still there. I'm trying to put that or comprehend, because there's a portion that's released at each stage, and yet number 1, based on the schedule, the city would retain 15% of the original surety bond amount. But then number 2, it says that upon proper execution of the warranty bond. And so is that just saying that 15% hangs out there until the warranty bond is signed, and then that 15% goes away and the warranty bond steps into place? That's what that means?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to clarify that, make sure I understood it. So I think you've answered a lot of the questions that I had about the warranty bond. I would like to see more, and I know that there's still a lot of questions out there, and so it makes me a little uneasy still with as many questions as we have as to how feasible this is and some of the processes in order to roll over a contractor's bond into it. The way that I read it, I mean, I don't see that option of being able to use the contractor's bond, but I guess it can be interpreted that that is the warranty bond. So that does worry me a little bit, but I think that you've probably answered the questions there. I guess the last question I would have would roll back to some of those processes that we have been able to do previously on subdivisions, and again, the same thing would be in place where previously we could bond or put up a certain amount of cash to cover anything that would be considered punch list items. And again, relative to that, this would eliminate that ability.
No, because again, what we have to kind of backtrack a little bit is we are meddling a little bit into the actual development part with the subdivision ordinance. This is really a subdivision ordinance on how to get a plat through the process, as opposed to the development of it.
Okay.
So the language with, you know, punch list and how that's handled, because we know we have winters here, you know, sometimes things, that would be through the development code still,
Okay.
under that part of it. And so we could still, I know Merrill's working on that. He's left.
You left.
Or you-
You left your hanging.
as far as putting that kind of language in there. So
Okay.
this leads it up to that point and then hands it off.
Okay.
This ordinance hands it off at that point on how the development part of it goes, because that enters purely into the engineering, development, construction part of it, as opposed to the subdivision itself.
So then somebody who did not do the full project bonding could go through, and if they have a small punch list, they would still be able to record a plat under a process through the
For the
development.
development, and that would be in the development stuff, and I know Merrill's aware of that, and so we'll have to make sure that that gets written into the development,
Code or plan.
into the development. It's gonna be basically a development manual, from talking to them now, and it'll be under Title 12.
Okay.
And so that's one of the reference we have. In fact, it's the last thing on there is we have those the standards for development now in place that engineering handles, that we do not through the planning part of it. And so there's a generic reference there that basically, it appears a couple places, that development is going to be based on the engineering standards, which from what we have now are going to be under Title 12. And so that's where those things will get caught.
So if I can ask her,
Yes.
I can ask a
Matt?
question. So the building permit, back to the building permit part of the house part, where I'd probably be more interested, than section 15 then, the building codes would have to codify something that says or allows, hey, there's a punch list, but we could still issue a building permit for the house? Or,
Or is that 12?
No, the
Titled?
15 has to do with the building department and the contractors
Right.
and the license and bonding. And it's basically for the construction part of it, you know,
Right.
for the nail pounder, if you want, or the excavator. And we looked at that to see if there was some place in there that if we were going to go down the road of having a developer's license and bond as opposed to an A1 or A2 or B contractor type, that would be where that would have to appear, and we'd have to modify, I don't know, half a dozen sections under that title to insert a process. So we kind of fell back on, and the legal department was part of this discussion about, you know, we have contractors that are developers that already are bonded. We'll need to make sure that that, you know, can be done in the bonding agreement, which is the legalese part of it. And so I think some of this, there's still questions, and I agree with that. But I think the process is always going to be, is those questions can be forwarded on with the recommendation also. Is we still have questions, is, you know, can we think of something else with the building permit issue? We can, you know, we want to make sure that everybody understands, can we use the contractor's existing bonding? That those things need to stay on the table if those are still questions, and obviously are, as it moves forward, because the council's going to have to deal with these same issues. you know, how they go forward. So that's a legitimate process of, you know, if you're positioned of, you know, maybe we want to make a recommendation, but we still have some things we want to leave, you know, for discussion that we have, like some more, you know, at their level of discussion on, that's fine too. We can have that punch list, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
So that's, would seem to be totally legitimate.
Other questions?
I have one more question, back onto the building permit. Is there anything against issuing a certificate of occupancy when the subdivision things have been met, but it's not paved, but the health, safety, and whatnot, things have been met? Because I know all we've talked about is withholding that certificate of occupancy, but is there any reason to not issue it if the people are willing to move in on a gravel road, understanding that there's going to be paving and everything going on in front of their house? Was that discussion had, I guess, is what?
Yeah, I mean, it was, the whole thing is what happens in that process, again, if they get done before the development gets done. And basically kept coming back to as well, you know, we withhold the CO till it's done, because the road isn't there. You know, we're not maintaining the road. You know, we can't guarantee that fire can get there. You know, we can't guarantee that services are going to be not going to be interrupted because the development isn't completed. You know, I mean, when you extend your services, usually do that all at once, all the way through. But you're, you know, you may be still tapping, you know, so you can have extra shutoffs. I mean, to us, there gets to be some complications, you know, when you kind of start thinking about what ifs. And so we kind of backtrack and go, what's the safest thing? Eliminate the what ifs.
Okay.
Other questions?
I'd just like
Jeff?
to make a comment. I think there's a lot of talk about development and the developers and their needs, but I think there needs to be a concern about the citizens and the city. If you get a house out there that, let's say the temporary gravel road gets washed out and it catches on fire, you know, it's a what if. But then that opens up the city for suit. And I think that's what the staff is trying to do, is to protect all the citizens, not just the developers.
Sure.
I just think that needs to be taken into consideration.
Right. However, understanding though that when these subdivisions get to a stage where the fire department signs off on it is when a building permit can be issued. It's not like there's just mud out there. There has to be an all-weather surface that the fire department can get there, period. And then they have to have water and power and sewer and everything to it. They just wouldn't have curb and gutter and a street because weather wouldn't permit it. That's basically all I'm saying. I'm not trying to say that people should move into houses that are going to burn and people aren't going to get to it to be able to save them. I know that there are a number of citizens, too, that would be very pleased to be able to speed that process up at the same time as they're looking to try and build and meet their timelines. They've sold their house, they're renting, and now they have to wait another 6 months because winter hit and the street wasn't able to go in. And so I mean, I think that there are all sides of it, and it's not just protecting the developer, it's trying to create a system that works for the city as well as for the private citizens.
I think, you know, one of the issues is that citizen or the consumer protection part of it. And, you know, you can play all kinds of scary what if scenarios. But if we play on the scenario that, you know, we've got a gravel street in with no curb and gutter, no pavement, and the house is built, you know, let's play the what if. You come in and start putting the curb and gutter in and paving the street and shutting it down while you're doing that. There's no access to the house that's back and behind it again. So those are still the what ifs that we have to play. And, you know, what are the odds of something like that happen? You know, probably pretty slim and none, but it only has to happen once. You know, and the city buys a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 house. You know, so.
Well, I know a lot of other communities are making it work. And so I guess I'm just trying to figure out if Pocatello can make
Yeah.
it work.
And, you know, like I say, when we look at it, is there's some that do, some that don't, and they all have their reasons why they do and why they don't.
Yeah.
So there is no one size fits all on it. So,
Other questions for Dave? I have a question. So as we look at Municipal Code Title 12 and Title 15, will those be coming before us as well?
no.
So those are not going to be revamped, they already are in place and sitting where they need to be?
Two answers. The reason it won't come before you is because they aren't involved with the planning and development
Okay.
aspect of any of these
Okay.
projects. So the Title 15 stuff has to do with the building codes. And so the building department, you know, that's their venue. The Title 12 stuff has to do with the physical development. It's the public works standards is modified, amended by the city of Pocatello on the type of concrete you use, how wide the streets are, you know, how much rock you need, size of water lines, sewer lines, and materials. And so those codes, again, don't come before this body.
It just seems that they are a piece of the puzzle
Yes, they are.
that we're missing. I mean, as some of these questions are asked, and I'm not familiar with the development plan, but those are addressed. So, I mean, it's just, that was why the question, because it fleshes out what we're seeing in front of us, and this is, so that's the only reason for the question.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, the way this is proposed, there'd be no changes to 15, which is the building code stuff. We
Okay.
eliminated trying to go down that road, feeling that we could incorporate with the legal department, being able to use contractors' existing bonds, you know, for warranty if their language in their bond would go that far. So we felt we could accomplish the same thing by doing that rather than amending another code.
Sure.
And then, like I say, the development standards, you know, there's development standards in place, you know, that would still be active until the, you know, a new code was, or manual was adopted, that they're updating.
So I'm going to hammer on this section 15, and I'm sorry. I mean, I'm all for processes that aren't codified usually end up in bad places, because what you did for that guy, you're not doing for me, right? And it's not codified. So I guess the section 15, that's where I think that's where the code would be changed to allow the building official to issue a permit on a lot that might not have everything in it. I think that's probably a better place maybe than, I think, the subdivision code. So I guess,
The question is, why is it here?
yeah. Well, no, I think I have that. Could that section 15 be changed? I mean,
Well, it can be changed, but
it would take the city
if
council.
we have the control in this code, then there's no need to change code in
Right.
15.
Because
Because basically what happens is that as a building permit comes in, you know, it's just checked in. Again, we're talking primarily about residential, but these codes apply to commercial and
Sure,
industrial
sure,
also.
yeah.
So it comes in, it goes back to engineering. They look at, you know, stormwater issues for big developments. They'll look at erosion sediment control plans, you know, even for one house. They look for, and note on there, you know, for sidewalks, you know, where the property line is in relationship to the sidewalk. It usually has to be put in with the building
Okay.
permit.
So
When
it'd
it
be,
comes to
so it'd be
planning-
engineering then that would flag and say, hey, there's no sidewalk and curb and gutter yet on this
That's part of
subdivision.
theirs, and then it comes to planning also, for checking setbacks. So we pull the plat, you know, the plat has to be recorded, we have to have all that. Engineering has to have a recorded plat, because they have to assign an address to the property and put that through the notification process. It starts that whole series, so by the time we get done with it, then we give it to the building department to do the structural,
Yeah,
electrical,
that's-
plumbing. And once the building permit is issued, and it goes, you know, through all the inspections, they keep on record on that. Of course, we collect the water and sewer fees, utility billing eventually gets into it, know where to send the bills, and eventually all that gets transferred. In fact, they were in the office today looking from the county assessor's office because they want to put on the tax rolls. So it's a very, involved process, and you're right, each one has their little section of code, and we just have to make sure that everybody is coordinated, with those processes. So we catch it at multiple levels is what it happens.
Any other questions for Dave? Thank you. Okay, discussion among commissioners, please.
I'm tired.
Ryan's tired, but he needs to vent, it looks like.
I move that we approve the
I don't want to, okay, maybe you're welcome to make a
We
motion.
can, yes, we can make a motion and we can.
Have discussion.
Have discussion
Have
of the
discussion
motion.
about the motion.
If we have a second.
go.
Okay?
I move that we approve the subdivision ordinance Title 16 as amended.
And recommend approval by the council
Yes,
and recommend the chair to sign the findings of fact.
correct.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a second on that motion? Motion dies for lack of a second. Do I have another motion on the floor?
Or discussion.
Or discussion at this point? Yeah,
Have a
let's
little bit of discussion.
All right, that's what I asked for before. Okay, so let's have some more discussion.
So I know, Ryan, I know you probably have a lot more comments about it. I mean, I kind of like where it's at, but I think there's 2 or 3 big questions that I could see recommending to the council, hey, here it is, but there's 2 or 3 things that have to be looked at before approval. And then one is the bonding. Can we actually do this and actually get the bonding? That's a big deal. We don't want to have something go out there where it's hard for the developers to actually get that bonding. So I think that question needs to be answered. I'm still stuck on and I think this is from years ago of, the curb and gutters in, it's just not paved. November 17th rolls around, they shut off the hot mix plants, and now you wait for 5 months, before you can actually go build a house. And I'm having a hard time with that because there's lots of houses in the valley that don't have paved roads. They have graveled roads. So I'm having a problem with that. Is there a way to define how much of a punch list you can have and issue a building permit? Now, it scares me with no curb and gutter because where everyone thinks the curb and gutter is in the pins, and you have houses built, and then next spring rolls around and whoops, the curb and gutter's actually, that kind of scares me. But I don't know, I still think that there's something with the punch list that we could define better maybe, or we could issue those building permits earlier, but I definitely don't want a developer going bankrupt over the winter and then having, one resident out there in their lone house down a paved road or a graveled road that hasn't been paved yet. That would be a fiasco, right?
And on that note, with the bonding that is being required, I guess, if somebody bonds on the entire subdivision, it just seems like that risk is gone.
Yeah.
And certainly would hope within the time period required. At the same time, back to the bonds, calling on these bonds isn't easy. This isn't just a giveaway for a
It's not automatic, yeah.
And so, I mean, that concern is there as well. I agree with what you're saying, Matt, though, on the building permits, that I think that there can be more flexibility, that we can find some way to make that still possible, especially in these weather with weather conditions like what we face here that would allow for homes to be built but not streets to be paved. And then I don't know if anybody else does, but I still have concerns about the property line adjustment provisions, and we haven't even talked about that at all tonight. I find some things in there probably overcomplicating some very simple situations. So I have very mixed feelings about that still.
Dave, could I ask you a question, if you wouldn't mind coming up for a moment, please? And this is education for me. So the concern on the building permit, is that something that's worked out in the development plan? So that, I mean, is that something we really should be addressing in the subdivision ordinance for the certificate of occupancy, or is that addressed someplace else?
We would want to set the table in the subdivision code.
Okay.
In order to support whatever comes, so the development code itself will carry that forward. So, and there's a lot of these things, that's what we do at the very end here. We're setting the table for,
Okay.
the development part of it. So I would say, yes, we would want, kind of the parameters. If it comes down to, well, everything's got to be there, but maybe we'd like to see it being able to go with, all-weather gravel surface, but the curb and gutter has to be in.
Right.
And that's the only thing that can be missing type thing. That can be a suggestion that can be put forward.
So let me put a little more info out there. Last couple of Decembers, I've been working through December and pouring concrete, and it's great as sweatshirt weather. The hot mix plants are off though in November, right? So making the developer, hey, you can heat the ground, you can cover the curb and gutter, you can pour concrete, clear into sometimes January, and you're okay. So I could see landing somewhere like that. Hey, curb and gutter has to be in.
The issue there on curb and gutter, that sets the standard for where's the sidewalk, what's the ADA slope, is the sidewalk right behind the curb, or is there a 5-foot or 6-foot landscape strip? In order to get, so there needs to be an anchor. I'll just put that on. There needs to be some kind of anchor out there, for it to be based on. And that's pretty much what the protocol leads us to right now. And the only other comment I would have is, quite honestly, if a developer's getting down to that point and knowing that we're not gonna have the whole thing done and the hot plant shutting down, pave the stinking road as far as you can get into the last lot and, go for the rest of the season the other way. So we can play the game. There's questions on both sides. I think we all realize that for, what's the best scenario. But it's that kind of thing that if you're comfortable with saying that, instead of having everything to the lot line, we feel if, we've got all the utilities in and curb and gutter are there and the street is the only impediment, then that could be put forward as an alternative what's, drafted here and presented also. That's fine. That's why we're here.
In my opinion is that's the only thing that you wouldn't have. You'd have the curb and gutter in, you have all the utilities are in, everything's in and tested and set and done, right? The only thing that's left is
The street
the street,
and
due to
weather conditions.
weather and some other situations. So
And they're usually going to be minor punch list items as well. Some grout in a manhole, and if you're paving and then you have to go back in and put the rings on it and put your grade rings on and grout those out, and so it's more than just asphalt.
Right.
So
But
there's
the
some
things that
minor
come
things.
after asphalt would also need to be a part
Part
of
of that.
as well.
Because your road is, your road grade's going to be set for your finished grade to have, your manholes, your storm drains, even your curb and gutter, to be able to take the asphalt layer to bring everything to flush. So you're going to have those things installed, and they're going to be up, a couple inches. But again, those types of things, if that's something that may be more flexible, we can certainly pass it through with that recommendation that, that be part of the recommendation of being able to get it that far. That's fine. I mean, again, that's up to you guys.
And a comment back on the curb and gutter. So property pins are put in place prior to curb and gutter, and property pins is really what sets it all. I mean, the curb can actually be set off and the park strip be wider than what it's supposed to be, but the property pin is really
That's really where you're
what
at.
counts. And so I don't know that, the curb and gutter should, and I'm not saying that I'm totally opposed to that being it, but the building can be built with the property pins in place
Right.
because it's all defined.
I would agree with that. I would just say the elevation to what you were saying. If I know where the curb and the gutter's at, it's pretty easy for me to set the elevation of where I want my garage floor and how the house is going to lay out, right?
Yeah.
Not that can't be done either.
Sure.
Right? I mean, that can be done as well, but.
And I'll say in our experience, we've probably had 2 subdivisions where we've gotten to we didn't get curb and gutter done prior to winter, and we decided not to heat the concrete, and because the asphalt plants were shut down and it wasn't going to do us any good.
Yeah, anyways.
Anyway, and so we just waited until spring, and it sat there, for the 4 or 5 months until we could have warm enough temperatures to do the curb and gutter and then do the asphalt. If there was the option to put in the curb and gutter and then go ahead and move forward with building permits, I think at that point you assess and say it's probably worth it to go ahead and heat it and move forward. So just based on experience, we've had a couple that have done that. We try and build them in the building season. That's ideal, but
That's what we all try.
it doesn't
That's what we
always
try.
end up that way.
Well, it tells you get your plats in the winter and early spring, don't wait until September
I
to
know.
the plat.
I know.
Oh, minor details.
Yeah.
So, but there was also a comment that the pins can wash out. If somebody said something about them maybe being moved or,
Well, sometimes when they grade, they can bump them or pull them out or rip them out or whatever. But usually, I mean, they're marked, and if a builder's going to build, he better know where the pins are.
And according to this, we're putting in 6-foot posts around all of those pins, and
yeah, but somebody gets run over them anyway.
That's for the
They can.
boundary of the subdivision.
okay, yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't for the lots, right?
Right.
That wasn't for each lot. That was just for the
For
boundary of the
subdivision boundary. No, that's fine. And we do them on all of our lots. But even at that, afterwards, the pins will get pulled. And I don't know that anything in here is going to change that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because honestly, there's difficulties even in subdivisions that are built, with the street end, the curb and gutter, because the sidewalks aren't there. And it's a matter of achieving that grade on, the driveway approach from the curb to the sidewalk, and then having, the 2% slope. There's some subdivisions, because of topography, where the sidewalks are right behind the curb, which makes the driveway cuts a lot more complicated, because you still have to do an ADA crossing through the driveway. So, and I just know, that is, to me, that's a real good thing to have, is you have that curb and gutter elevation already set there. But that's, again,
So I think the question before us now is, do we want to just throw some questions out there and then punt it off to City Council? Do we want staff to continue to investigate and see if they can come up with a solution to questions where we then just recommend approval to the City Council? I see those as
That's
our
exactly
options.
our 2 options right now.
I mean, on the bond, if someone could say, yes, there's, there's
Definitely.
4 companies, and yes, it's
And they'll
not a
do
big
that.
deal, and they'll do it, and, it takes some effort on the developer to go change it, and that's it. Okay, that's a non-issue, but right now, I'm a little worried that we'd pass that, and if that causes a hiccup,
Well, it could cause
It
the
could-
project not to be developed, is what
that's
you're
it.
saying.
That's it.
not more than a hiccup.
yeah.
So what I'm hearing is it's not the bond itself that you're necessarily have a concern with. It's the ability to,
I think, for me personally, I am comfortable with everything in here, other than just the permitting, being able to pull permits a little faster if the paving wasn't done. I think there needs to be more flexibility with that, given, weather and everything else. The bond I'm comfortable with, of kind of the compromise, as Dave explained it. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about that.
Ryan Loveland, do you have any thoughts?
I'm not nearly as versed in these things as these two on the end.
Yes, I'm not either, so.
But it does feel kind of like we got this thing that we're really tired of looking at.
Yeah.
But it's not quite in a nice finished sense that I really feel extremely comfortable passing it on either, So I'm very much on the fence right now.
Can I ask a question? So, whatever we do and recommend forward, it still goes to a public hearing at the city council?
Yes.
At which time we could also participate in that public hearing at the city council?
Yes. Like I say, what we'll do before even the council hearing, we'll take and go to a work session in order to kind of set the whole table, for instance, if there's a recommendation, but there's still some concerns about implementation of, say the building permit part or the warranty bond part, so that they are aware of that also.
Yeah.
Before it goes forward. And like I say, we have been working with the legal department. They've been involved with this process through the whole thing. And so they're not getting blindsided by it either. So that's the process that we would observe.
We would also have the option of attending the work session, correct?
Yeah, it's open.
It's an
it's
open meeting.
public,
Yeah, so,
Do they review everything we've reviewed? I mean, when their packet includes all our minutes
Yes.
and everything, and whether or not they read them is
Yeah.
another question.
That
But
you
We'll
could
give them all
ask.
the minutes. And we submit the packet of the record. And then the staff report, our obligation from the staff level, of course, is to flesh these issues out. And if there's still things that, are of concern on our end, and of course in the public's end during the hearing process, of being able to put them back on the plate again, and, so
Well,
it's part of the whole public process.
I'm with Ryan Loveland. I don't believe in doing things halfway. If we're not comfortable with it, let's get it solved and then pass it on. That's why the mayor appointed us. So,
Well, we're close. Aren't we close?
I think
we're close.
I think we're
Close,
pretty close.
If we're looking for just a couple answers to questions that come through legal, then I think we can do a motion that just says, some of the effect, recommend approval, but with the findings from legal, or I can't remember what that is exactly. I can't come to the good wording at this exact moment, but yeah.
Sorry.
No.
And in the end, I mean, they do make the decision no matter what our recommendation is, and they could say the heck with
Everything.
the questions that we have and make their own thing. And so there might be a certain benefit to just posing our questions and passing it on, and then letting them kind of work through those details through their work session and
Wrestle with it a
their
little.
They might have all new questions
and
themselves.
very well could that begin their process.
Yeah.
So I'm open to either way myself. I don't mind continuing to hash it out. I tend to feel that going back and forth with staff with some of these things, that I don't know that I'm going to get all of my things answered, and I'm certainly accepting of that. But at the same time, I'm certainly willing to continue to give input as some of that process goes along. But if we want to pass it on, I'm open to that as well.
Gentlemen, I can't make any motions or recommendations, but we have before us, we have a couple of options. We can choose to send staff back to, try to answer some of our questions, and then come back again and review it. We would need to, Dave, whoops, they're not paying attention.
We wouldn't have to redo a public hearing, would we?
I think we might, would we have to, no, we would not have to redo a public hearing?
We could just continue our discussion.
Can we continue our discussion?
Well, I think, just from, purely staff perspective at this point, is that unless you've got some very clear direction that you want us to go in, we would need that. So for instance, on the building permit, if you feel like the building permit issue is down to, yeah, we want curb and gutter, but we'll accept gravel roads, with the surety bonding, then that's very specific. And we can just put that in, this is what we drafted, and the planning commission is recommending that, it'd be more flexible in that, and here's exactly what you're comfortable with.
But we could even do that in an amendment right at this exact moment.
You can do that right now as part of your recommendation.
Yeah,
Our motion.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that would, of course, be forwarded exactly in that form. As far as the bonding, what is the specific issue or issues? And what do you want us to look for? We've beat this thing up pretty good at our level. And, one of the reasons for these processes is to get the input. But at some point, we need something very specific. What are you looking for? So that we know what, avenue to go down. Or again, is it something you can go, if it's something specific, it could be tagged just like the curb and gutter type thing on the recommendation. So that's kind of where we're at. We think we've done.
Responded and tried to adjust.
Yeah, and like I say, without some very clear direction on what you want us to do, it's kind of hard for us to know.
To bring us a rock, bring us another rock.
Yeah.
So the question is whether there are surety companies that will write the bonds.
Yeah,
It's not like
that
And
really is.
how complicated that process
Is
would
that,
be. Yeah.
So
how hard is that?
like mutual insurance writes bonds,
Farm Bureau.
Farm Bureau writes bonds. They've got to have a bond department.
And Merrill.
It's that easy to probably call them up and ask.
Well, Merrill tried.
Merrill did reach out, but did
and
not
they-
get anything
Yeah,
back.
they didn't respond.
But he said he reached out to some banks, didn't he?
Yeah,
The banks
but also to
responded, but the
Farm
insurance
Bureau,
companies did
right,
not.
Merrill? Yeah, he called Farm Bureau and asked, and they didn't call him back.
One of our best sources for that
Is
Is us,
yeah.
yeah.
is the contractors
Right.
that do this that
Yeah.
are bonded and insured, of asking their companies what's
Can you-
involved is.
Right.
None of us are bonded and insured.
Sure.
You
And
know,
I'm more than happy to check into that. And the truth is I would be okay with this if I had, there is just that question of the way that our bond works right now as a contractor isn't the way that this is written. And if the way that this was written is the same way that our bond works, I'm fine with it because that makes sense and it doesn't add a big hassle to the process and it's open for other developers even if they're not licensed to be able to get a license and get a bond that way, or they can explore these other types of bonds that I don't know about necessarily for warranty work on a subdivision. And so for me, if we had the assurance that our current contractor's bond will roll into this, then I'm okay with it.
What if it's a separate bond?
And then if it's a separate bond, it brings up more question for me as to what with the current contractor's bond doesn't work that won't roll into it. Why does it work?
Cost, and is it?
And yeah,
is
and
it
what's the cost for the additional bond? And
the 2-year period, if that is a worry from the bonding companies and.
yeah.
And I don't know that staff has the answer, and we certainly don't have the answer to that right now. Again, I think what Dave's telling us is, if we've got some specifics, it sounds like we might have on the curb gutter street as far as the building permit. It actually sounds as though we might on the warranty bond, and the specific question is, can the existing construction bond that a developer has roll
A
into.
contractor
A
has,
contractor,
yeah.
sorry, roll into the warranty bond.
Right. But I think it's also good to explore and find out if somebody doesn't have a contractor's bond, what steps will they have to go through to bond? Does that mean just getting a contractor's bond, or is this other bond out there an option, or will they have to get a contractor's bond because that's the only kind of bond that will even cover it, and that's what we don't know. And I'm happy to research that and to try and figure some of that stuff out, but that doesn't help us tonight.
No, but thank you for the offer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, so we could postpone this until we get that information. We could recommend this with to the council with these questions needing to be answered on the warranty bond, and then the language changed on the building permit. Is that what I'm hearing? That's kind of what you're telling us, Dave?
Yeah,
And I don't feel that that's punting anything or just kicking the can down the road. I mean,
I agree.
That actually gives them a
that gives
direction.
the council, we've spent time, and here's our review, and here's our issues.
Okay.
Issues are with these two things. Now it's in council's lap, and they can.
And in the meantime, Ryan can do some.
In the meantime, Ryan.
And I'll provide what I find to staff, and they can pass that on
Sure.
to the city council.
yeah, because that record's open through that whole process for still input on these things. And so, maybe we'll get a crowd at the council hearings.
Yeah, the crowd of commissioners.
Two of you.
I'm not going to be there.
So, additional discussion from,
The only last discussion I would
Okay.
have, and nobody took me up on it, so I'll ask one last time. Does anybody else have any concerns on the property line adjustment?
No, in fact, in the last week, I was made aware of a situation where this property line adjustment would have been of tremendous value. The guy cannot sell his house because he thinks one of his neighbors, that was a kind of a subdivided lot, he thinks his neighbor has built a septic system on part of his lot. So I think this is a tremendous idea.
I see a lot of value to it going forward. I mean, the thing I like is it's not retroactive, but going forward and having seen some things come through here with those little bits and pieces, and knowing that there were surveys done on other properties and developments and people built not on the right area, this seems to be a real positive move forward. I don't know what your concerns are. You said that it was complicated.
Right, so two concerns that I have. Number one is just cost involved, that, a 5-foot strip of property completely costed out in this process, and it just doesn't happen. And so there's going to be a limit of potential possible better uses for some properties, because the process might be a little more complicated. And then the second one just being, and I completely understand and agree with the protection aspect of it, but with that protection, we are also giving up rights. That individuals have rights to sell their property and to do stuff with their property that this tends to be stepping on.
Is it necessarily removing those rights or just making it more expensive?
Well,
I mean, that's about all it is. It's saying,
Same
again,
difference.
and
Yeah.
I talked to a
See, and I don't
surveyor
see
friend
it
of
that
mine,
way.
and it wasn't even relative to this. I wasn't thinking about it. I was just, we were on a scout hike and needed something to talk about. But
And you talked about
we didn't talk
this.
about this. We just talked about what he's doing with his job, and he had been recently in a situation where he was trying to save him some money and say, yeah, your line should be about here. That's about where you should put your fence. But someone flipped out, and he had to come in and end up doing the final survey for he's like a foot of gravel. I mean, a gravel, but of ground.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those.
And see,
I
think-
don't, this probably just make it mandatory, that that's what we have to do.
I think it protects property rights, actually, by doing this, and it would protect me as a homeowner if I were going to buy property or adjust it. Yes, I know it costs more, but I don't see it, I see it more as identifying what's there and what really belongs to you. And then everything else on what you can do on your property is already in code and setbacks and all of that. So it would protect me from potentially building in a section that I really shouldn't be, and then have difficulty maybe selling the property. So that's how I view it as a homeowner.
Yeah, this instance that I was made aware of, the guy's neighbor allegedly has built like 10 feet onto his property. Now that makes his property unsellable, and the guy that's trying to sell his house has to pay for the survey, which should have already been done. And it's one of those things that it was kind of subdivided and da-da-da-da. I think this is just a total protection. I know it's expensive, but that's the way I see it.
So, but we can definitely, I mean, the record will show your concerns.
The record shows it. Very good.
So, what's your pleasure?
Anybody want to make a motion?
Ryan, you've been so quiet, you should.
I'm going to go back to where I was. You know, if we're not comfortable with it, then let's not pass it on until we are. So that's right.
And I think if Tubby and Satterfield are saying that they're comfortable,
No,
I'm deferring to them.
No, don't defer to anybody.
I think what the potential is that we would want to identify those questions, that the council be aware of them if we choose to move this forward, that it would come with those things, the statement about the warranty bond and the statement about the curb and gutter or the building permit
Right.
statement. That's what I'm hearing as a potential.
So you have to rewrite it with those recommendations to take it to council, Dave?
Not the subdivision ordinance. They would put in the letter of recommendation those items, correct?
Correct. What it'd be is, this code would go forward, you know, with the red text in, just like it is. If there's recommendations for modification of any of those sections, that would be because it'd be part of your motion. Part of what your recommendation is to look at that section about the building permits, and, you know, like say if you wanted, well, the only thing we're willing to give up is it doesn't have to be paved, but fire department's gonna have to say that, you know,
It's okay.
it's okay. That's a very specific thing, and we would just put it forward with that modification. The bonding one, actually probably the same if the concern is sounds like two legs, is want some kind of assurance that existing contractors' bonds can be either modified by your bonding company without any, you know, major deal, and that we would accept those. And then what's the opportunity for, you know, someone else to bond that's not a contractor? That may be more difficult to answer, because as you know, bonding is a matter of, you know, credit,
Creditworthiness and assets.
trustworthy assets, history, and things like that. So, you know, those are legitimate questions. And like I say, a motion could be put forward with those needing to be answered, you know, as part of that process. Or, like I say, you know, I think the one with the curb and gutter is pretty
Straightforward.
The one with the, can we use our contractor's bond, needs a little information from someone that has access to the contractor's bonding information, you know, with their history and what their company is. But those are specifics, and that's kind of where we're at. We, you know, so we can either pass it on with specifics,
Or send staff to come back with those specifics.
Do we have a preference as a commission on
Well,
where we want to see the development up to before we allow, before we see building permits being given.
well, for me, it's very simple to define, hey, if you don't have pavement, that's fine, as long as the fire department signs off on it, and you have a, a gravel approved surface. Curb
So
and
you don't-
gutter, yes, curb and gutter should be in.
You want the curb out.
That is, well, I might want a little more than that, but I can see that that's very easy to define and codify, right? I don't know how everyone else feels. I do feel with Jack though. I know we've dragged this out. Are we in a hurry for any reason? If we took 2 more weeks, I know that drags it out another 2 weeks, but
It's really up to the commission. If we're to a
Let's do it
point where
next time.
we believe we can have some questions answered to finalize where staff moves forward, then, we can
Right.
do that, definitely. But I guess what I would suggest to us is if we come back again, then we need to be ready
if
to move, because it has,
So we would not be continuing the public hearing at that point. We
No.
would just be motioning to continue
Continue our
discussion
discussion.
of the.
Do we even have to make a motion? Can we just adjourn it?
yeah, we could.
And then just
Dave's shaking
continue?
his head, yes.
And then we just continue it, put it on the thing
On
for
the
next
next
time?
agenda.
And then
Okay. But we will direct staff.
and then correct.
We need to direct staff to make the changes in relationship to the building permit. So is there a recommendation on language for that? I mean, we've had the discussion, and what staff has done in the past is taken our discussion and reworked it. So we can do that if you'd like. And then that would give Ryan hopefully a chance on the warranty bond. So if the commission feels more comfortable doing that, certainly we can do that.
What page is that?
It's on page 25, and I'm thinking under, I don't know, there's an item A, and I don't know if it's easier to just put a number 3 or just.
I wouldn't mind having staff research other communities that do issue permits prior to the subdivision improvements being completed and how they do it. What do they have in place? Does the fire marshal just go out and say, okay, we're good because we meet the fire code, even though curb and gutter's not in?
Yeah.
You know, and do they allow that? I've done most of my stuff in Pocatello. It's never been an option, so I don't have any experience with that necessarily, but I know that there are communities in the proximity even that do that. And so that might be my take on that portion for the assignment for staff.
Okay. Dave, did you get all that good stuff?
City of Chubbuck. No building permits until plat is recorded and development is dedicated, and they give no direction on what they mean by that,
Yeah.
okay?
So some areas don't have curb and gutter. Some streets don't have curb and gutter in Chubbuck.
Idaho Falls allows a maximum of 2 model homes after preliminary plat, but they must have frontage on an existing public street. That's the one that didn't make a lot of sense, you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can do your corner homes.
Requires approval of the construction drawings prior to the final plat going to the city council, requires development agreement, requires guarantee of completion, and then it says, no building permits until done.
This is great definition. We're really good.
Wow.
They may issue a guarantee. They do require a surety bond at 150% with a surety company, or they can take cash, certified checks, negotiable bonds, or irrevocable letter of credit, or any other thing that the council determines is adequate.
Gold or
It could be
silver?
your mother-in-law.
And who's that?
Idaho Falls.
Idaho Falls.
Somebody we should put that language in. That's what
No,
you
thank
wanted.
you.
That's what I was
Boise
thinking.
requires a improvements constructed, a recorded plat, and a surety bond for any outstanding, and Of course, this says the parcel numbers assigned by the county, which happens when you record. It doesn't give any details of that extent again. So those are the three that I looked at specifically for this. And from the past history, it's really consistent with a lot of the stuff. You got stuff all over the place. And when you talk or get feedback from them, doesn't matter what system they have,
They don't like it.
they don't like it.
Problems and
Yeah.
I think you
So
mentioned that before.
I don't know where we can go. I mean, eventually it just ends up that what do you feel is best for Potel?
Okay.
And what do you want to put forward? Because
Yeah.
there is no consistency.
Okay.
I wish there was. It'd be a lot easier,
Yeah.
but there isn't.
And what they have built into their development procedures and whatnot outside of this, just like what we've faced
Right.
here, we don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like I say, it's just not an easy road to go down because I can't find anything that says, hey, a majority of them do this way. That would be easy. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But,
So, I don't prefer vague language that leaves it up to, somebody to make a decision. So
Right.
one guy gets it one way and the next guy
Well,
gets
and I
it the other
think
way.
that's what we're trying to do in here
Right.
is to
Right.
make it more.
So for me, I'm still of the, okay, pavement, that's it. You miss the shut off for the hot plant. It's warm and sunny and 60 degrees clear to the 1st of January. You could get all your concrete in and everything. I don't see why there would be a problem with that,
Yeah.
as long as there's surety, the surety bond and everything else. And that, to me, is easy to define for
yes,
staff.
and that's easy to
Pavement.
present.
Okay.
That's
So,
recommendation from the
Right.
commission.
is that
So-
agreeable?
And it's better than what we have. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, let's do that. And then, what are we going to do on the warranty bond?
Well, I think Ryan was going to check. I'm not bonded anymore in construction, but I might be able to check with some people as well, just to see what might be available.
So what I'd like to see is if we come back with that information, that we give specific language to be included so that at our next meeting, we've got it where we feel comfortable moving it forward.
So we want staff to go over the language of allowing everything but pavement. okay?
Pavement, yeah, to the curb and gutter stage, and then everything from pavement on being the final
And
things.
your minor punch list
Yes.
stuff is, I keep going over.
And the fire department has to okay it.
Okay.
Yeah. Something down that line.
And we will look at specific language to put in to allow the current contractors.
Right.
We being you.
Or if we can answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. If,
Hey, this is common, it's done all the time, it's no
Right.
problem, everybody will do this, it's not an issue, then I
So-
think, I'd
Yeah.
feel comfortable.
So what I will try and do is get from the insurance company what their interpretation would be for a bond as it's here. And then submit that to the city. The city legal department can review that and say whether or not that actually works for what their intent is. And if what we have there works, great, but that will open at least up the conversation to see what will and what won't work. And so, yeah, we can be working.
Can you work with legal in 2 weeks? I'm within.
Well,
The holiday.
it's legal, they're attorneys.
the
Well-
point is that whole section may have to be rewritten if we find out.
Correct,
Something-
that there's an issue.
Right, if
Yeah.
there is an issue,
It's
I don't
true.
believe there is, but there might be.
Yeah.
It's
So
true.
Just to be aware.
why pass it on to city council
Right.
Until we answer that question.
until,
Okay.
and then they pass an ordinance which can't be met?
and then Ryan proves that it can't be met later. We have a mess.
Well, I just don't believe we ought to pass this on to the city.
Okay.
With,
Oh,
'cause,
yeah.
you get somebody out there that can't get this bond, and then they sue the city, and then,
Yeah. And then the city's
we
like,
kind of defeated partially what I said before. We're
Right.
not in the public interest anymore.
Right.
And we're not doing our job.
Okay.
So I guess the motion is
Can I go over
to,
this so I know?
Yes.
We all know
What we think
What
we're
we've
I
said.
doing?
think you were supposed to be doing?
Certainly.
Commission agreed to continue the discussion, have specific language, and have questions researched by staff and commission members for section building permits for punch list and curb and gutter language and Saturday research section for surety bonds and get necessary steps and direction.
And
Does that work for
I'm
you?
also going to do some research on the bonds.
On bonds?
Yes.
Okay.
So all we have to do is close the meeting and then it will just magically open back up.
Well, we are magic.
Adjourn to a work session. That's all.
We still have a work session.
Yes, we do.
So much for your
Smile at
movie.
me.
We will adjourn to and talk about the work session. Thank you.
So you're going to continue
We're gonna
This is
continue
just
it.
time
until-
and date certain?
Is time and date certain is our next regularly scheduled
Do we need a
Planning and
motion?
Zoning Commission meeting. And this needs to be placed on the agenda for continued discussion. Thank you for the
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
soft